As more and more conversation is centered around stimulus proposals and what to do next, there's one type of proposal that I really haven't seen a whole lot of information on, and that is student loan forgiveness. It seems messy, it seems complicated, it seems hard to do. So my editor and I decided to take it upon ourselves and really dive into the research here and figure out what exactly are the consequences of forgiving all student loans. What are the pros, what are the cons? And you know what, we were actually pretty surprised with the results that we found, and it turned out to be pretty interesting. So there already are some proposals on deck that have to do with student loan forgiveness. Representative Omar from Minnesota, she proposed to cancel $30,000 of student loan debt. Former Vice President Joe Biden proposed to cancel $10,000 in student loan debt. And there currently are some programs in place that allow student loan forbearance, just basically allowing people to defer payments to a later date. And, you know, I think letting people off the hook for these loans is a great idea, but I was curious what the actual effects would be for the economy here, and boy, was I in luck. There is a 68-page study on this, and don't worry, you don't have to read it, because I'm going to cover the most important pieces of this study. I'll have a link in the description if you want to take a closer look at it, but the study is called The Macroeconomic Effects of the Student Debt Cancellation. So it starts by talking about how the increasing demand for college credentials coupled with the rising cost of attendance have led to more students than ever before to take out student loans. As we all know, we can see this in the world around us. And the average student loan balance is just getting higher and higher. The combination of this social pressure to get a degree with higher tuition just turns into this scenario that we have now with trillions of dollars worth of student loan debt. They go on to say, however, there are tons of social benefits to higher education. Things like human capital accumulation, social mobility, greater tax revenues, and social contributions that flow from a highly productive population, higher than average ability to play beer pong. I'm just kidding with that, I made that one up. But what are the negative effects of all this student loan debt? Well, first off, the paper states that college students focused on paying down debt are putting off other investments like buying a home or starting a family or taking on more debt to get additional degrees. It stated that every 10% increase in student loan debt reduces home ownership rates by 1 to 2% for the 5 years after leaving school. So a huge impact on the amount of people that own homes. I can see this personally, the people that I know that have advanced degrees, pretty much all of them delayed purchasing homes now that I think about it after I read that study. And a study titled The Impact of Student Loan Debt on Small Business Formation states, high student loan debt dampens business formation with the strongest effects among the smallest firms. So what it's saying is there's a direct relationship between student loan debt levels and small business formation, amounting to about a 14% decline in new businesses in counties where student loan debt is the highest. This means that being dragged down by student loan debt has a negative relationship to entrepreneurship, a major driver in the US economy. The researchers say if student debt is dampening household economic activity, we can expect forgiveness from this debt to produce a stimulus effect that will partially offset the cost of forgiving the student debt. This makes sense because the money can just be spent elsewhere if they're not having to worry about putting it towards loan payments. So let's get into what debt forgiveness will do to the economy. The researchers used both Moody's and FAIR models on risk management and data analytics to make predictions on what the economic effects would be if we forgive all of the student debt. The simulations state that the debt relief could boost real GDP by an average of $86 billion to $108 billion per year as people have those funds freed up to spend on other things. It would reduce the average unemployment rate by 0.22 to 0.33 percentage points over the 10-year forecast, and this would create more jobs with those positive entrepreneurial effects we had talked about, creating 1.2 million to 1.5 million new jobs per year. So this is great and all, but what are the consequences in forgiving $1.5 trillion in student debt? Both the simulations state that there would be inflationary pressures. However, they're not quite as bad as you may suspect. In the FAIR model, inflation peaks at about 0.3 and turns negative in later years. In the Moody's model, the effect is even smaller at 0.09% in increased predicted inflation. Now, this may pressure the Fed to increase interest rates to combat that, and they would be expected to increase them about 0.3% to 0.5% in the first few years, with longer-term increases at around 0.2 to 0.35%. However, despite this, the Fed might not actually increase interest rates whatsoever, because it's been stated that a single year increase in inflation doesn't have a huge macroeconomic effect, so they might just leave it be as is. However, that's the human element that's really hard to estimate in these kinds of simulations. So how would this be even accomplished? It's actually fairly straightforward and pretty similar to just any other stimulus that we've been accustomed to recently. The federal government would either purchase and then cancel or take over the payments of student debt currently held in the private sector. And there's two possible actions that could be done to reduce the effects on the government balance sheet. Number one, the Fed can purchase new financial assets, making for the losses in this forgiveness, or the Fed can isolate losses from the student loan forgiveness from the rest of its operating profits. In conclusion here, the simulations show that canceling student loan debt would have a positive impact on GDP, positive impact on employment, positive impact on home ownership, while having some small inflationary effects. However, there's many people that are against canceling student loan debt. On this side, there isn't a whole lot of research, but there are some fair points brought up that I want to give to you guys as well, so I can present both sides and be as unbiased as possible in this. The biggest argument against canceling student loan debt is that a majority of the debt is held by the highest income earners, who aren't really having a hard time in paying off their student loans as is because of the highest earners. The top 20% of income earners hold nearly 3 times more student loan debt than the lowest 20% of income earners. So as you can see, the biggest benefit would go to the highest earners. Simply eliminating all the $1.51 trillion in student debt is argued to be an example of making the rich richer. One possible solution here would be to have a cap to the forgiveness amount, like those proposals that I mentioned earlier. Having a cap of something like $30,000 would make that benefit translate a little bit better along all classes of income earners. Another argument against this one-time forgiveness is students in the future won't hesitate to take large loans because they think, hey, I'm just going to have my loan forgiven like they did, back in 2020. To me, this seems like more of a problem with the education system in general. I think a loan forgiveness program would almost definitely have to be in conjunction with some kind of tuition reform. Otherwise, there'd be no incentive for colleges to ever lower tuition, and in 10 years, we're just going to be stuck in this exact same situation where there's this massive amount of student loan debt just looming over all of these graduates' heads. And finally, the last argument is there's people who argue that the programs that we have right now are enough for people who have graduated and have student loans. People argue that the income-driven repayment plans are enough. For those enrolled under these plans, basically how it works is monthly payments are capped based on how much you earn after graduating. And depending on the plan, you'll be forgiven from your loans between 20 and 25 years after you graduate, which it's nice to be forgiven. It's nice for it to be based on your income, but having to pay basically your entire working life for your college degree also seems a little bit insane to me. For those interested in learning more about this, I recommend taking a look at the study that I had referenced. It's in the description. You can go ahead and dive in if you're more interested in this. I hope that I could do this topic justice in a relatively short video without just sitting and rattling off facts the entire time. It's kind of a challenge to make it engaging, and I hope I did a decent job with that. So what are your thoughts on this? I personally don't have a whole lot of an opinion because I don't have any student loan debt, but I'd be curious to see what exactly you guys think about it, or maybe you have some insights or ideas that might go against it or go for it that I didn't mention in this video. Your guys' comments are always really insightful. If you appreciate this video, if you appreciate that we read a 68-page research study in order to make this video, please consider clicking that like button. I would appreciate it so much. Until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.